We are very happy to have Chris Jones with us this morning. He started his pre-sales journey almost 8 years ago, and 3 years ago, he's been promoted in a leadership position. So congratulations, Chris, and thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. We're looking forward to understanding more about your experience. And to start with, we would like to understand why you love pre-sales and why you chose this path.
I think the interest of the job is there's always something different. No 2 days are ever the same, and there are always different challenges. And there's a chance to kind of leverage all of the kind of consultancy experience people get to build up over time on individual challenges and projects, while also kind of harnessing a real competitive desire that I think a lot of people within the industry have, is that, reckless desire to win absolutely at all costs regardless, and that kind of drive of competitive nature that not only are you kind of working with people, you're helping them and supporting them on their journey, you're also doing it while winning and trying to compete. And that I don't think I've met somebody in this industry who isn't competitive to the point of fault more than anything else. And I think that's a really interesting group of people to be around. And I think that, combined with the variation in the job, is what keeps me interested day to day. Is there's always a new challenge and problem to solve.
Amazing. So it's kind of the thrill of the chase and enjoying being in competitive scenarios, and enjoying the moment when things go well, and really feeling it when they don't go so well, and hopefully they go well more often than don't go well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you couple that with the thought of actually what you do can really make a difference to the people you're helping. So it's not just because if it was that, I think if it's like pure competitiveness only, I think sales tends to be the more kind of route for more people, like a traditional account manager. I think though, when you start talking about this, it's that competitive drive, but also in a way that you actually sit there and go, at the end of it, whoever we're working with will have something that will help improve, they'll move forward with it, and it's going to be a key part in their long-term maturity and change management within their own company. And I think that's got to be twinned off with that competitive drive as well.
Yeah,
is if you only have one part or the other, you tend to fall either into pure consultancy or purely into an account manager role. And that area between the two, I think, is where you really find people who thrive in this industry.
Yeah, so making the difference becomes the kind of the why, if that makes sense. It's like the underlying driver, and then that makes a lot of sense. And based on your experience managing a team and also previously as an individual contributor, how much of a difference do you think a great hire makes versus a solid hire? There are some kind of jobs where there might not be a huge difference in terms of output, and there are others where, they say, for example, with developers, it's like a good developer could be 10 times more effective than a decent developer. What do you think that ratio looks like in pre-sales?
I think it comes down to the type of software matters a lot on this. The more, and I think this is when you start getting to different hierarchies of types of pre-sales that they are. For example, we will use the term a lot of solution consultant rather than anything else. In fact, I appreciate that solution consultant, pre-sales engineer, solution engineer, all terms that get bandied around. But for me, a pre-sales is someone who will show software and assign value to it. Okay.
Yeah.
You can have technical consultants or technical pre-sales who will be all about features and functions. I think you then get a pre-sales who is about, here is value to the software I'm showing you. And we've got rid of the term solution engineer even in North America for our teams. And it's all about, because we sit there and go, you consultants, and the job is consulting, not presenting. Software actually takes a back seat to that, and it's all around the why and the challenges and the solution and helping solving it. And software can be a small part of that. But the reason I kind of talk is more about the difference it comes to making a good hire and a great hire, that level of consistency changes very quickly what you would expect from different people. Now, we tend to play more on the top end in the enterprise space. Average client is, the revenue is well over I think last year, the average new client was over 12 billion average revenue kind of size. Wow. and we're talking about quite complex structures. I mean, it's mainly health and safety, risk, operational risk, process safety. So potentially some quite complicated areas. But the difference between then within those groups, you need different types of people who can talk. Not every one of my team members, for example, can talk to a C-level and have that put all together to be able to discuss and manage that. So you need people who are good and solid hires as well, who can churn through work, especially when you've got different levels of engagement you need.
Yeah.
And they might fall more towards that kind of what I was calling a pre-sale, someone who does the value thing, but they're also going to be talking to operators and users and be able to do much more high volume value selling. Whereas then you have, I think 60% of my team, I think, would sit on the let's go and talk with senior managers and C-level and have a broad conversation around all of their goals and plans and digitalization and what that means for them operationally, and why having a piece of software would actually mean that they can increase revenue based on risk-based decision-making models that they can't achieve currently, And those, I think, are the ones that's the difference between a good hire, a solid hire, and someone who's really good hire, is that it drives you forward. And revenue-wise, we are talking the difference between maybe 3-4 times the amount of revenue you would expect them to be able to bring in, because the conversations they have are at such a higher level that the projects are inherently worth a huge amount more money on those projects overall.
You've talked about 3-4 times more, and what I'm kind of inferring from that is when the deal values are so high, then you really want a safe pair of hands that can do what's needed to be done, if that makes sense. And that's the difference that a great hire can make, is that you can have that kind of security that it will, that they can go in and do what's needed.
Exactly. We've got a project on the go at the moment which came in last minute from a large oil and gas 100 billion style company, came in with a last minute request for something that was not which was a bit out of the ordinary. And so we rejigged the entire workload so my number one person could go and work on it.
Yeah.
And we just sat there and went, okay, you're going to go and work on this. What are you working on? And then redistributed them all out to different people based on their levels of where we thought was the best people. So
yeah, makes total sense. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. So those pre-sales components like discovery sessions, demos, working with C-level executives are important in a different manner for each solution consultant according to their own level of experience. And if we are thinking about the personality, do you have some specific traits that you are looking for when you are hiring? Like, can you think about 3 qualities that your best SEs have?
It can, and it's what you're looking for is a certain level of openness and confidence. Realistically, you want to find, I have hired one person who has actually done pre-sales before in any capacity. Because I find that historically when I meet people from industries who want to move over and who've got pre-sales skill sets, that they're going to be, and I can think it goes back to last point, they can be very solid and plug and play and be okay, but they'll never really, the amount of work it takes to get them to be great takes years, okay? My number one guy now, it took him 4 years and a lot of hard work to get where he got to now, because he started off with very limited consultancy background. And that's actually what I now go for, is I look for people who are consultants, who are comfortable sat in a room talking and discussing, because soft skills can be taught. I don't believe people who sit there and go, you just need to find that personality. I disagree with that. I think you can teach it. The problem is the ramp up time is a long time on that, and it can be very challenging and difficult to work on those skill sets. So when we're talking to people, a lot of times it almost feels like a gut feeling that this is a person who you feel you can trust with the pressure. The reality is, I suspect it's 100 little micro decisions and mannerisms and things that actually add up to the way they stand, their posture, their discussions, their ability to hold a conversation. And oddly enough, there's little parts where when they're going, like we can do, rather than pausing and taking a moment so that the flow's all there, rather than breaking it up with, you get 100 little bits like that start giving you this feeling that this is someone who, when you put them in with, a C-level person, when you put them in with a senior manager who you need to get, who their job is then to arm the senior manager to go and pitch your language at C-level, they're going to be comfortable enough sitting and talking. And an understanding of being able to go, hey man, I've done your job. Let me tell you how I've solved this previously, matters hugely in these kind of things overall. So individual skills that people have, other than kind of having domain experience in the areas you want them to be able to go and talk about, a lot of it comes down to those kind of that broad grey area of soft skills where speech patterns, language, ability to talk, ability to make communication and connect with people very quickly, and also have that kind of social chameleon element, I think is really important. So that's what I tend to do on the first meeting, is really kind of just have a chat. And part of it is finding out about them a little bit, but I also don't want to talk about their CV because I've got their CV and I've read their CV, because that's the very least you can do, along with kind of Googling them, LinkedIn, finding out all that kind of stuff. The next part though is, it's part of it is me pitching who I am and the team are as people and what we believe in and our kind of belief system, and see what theirs are on the way back, and listen to what their biggest failures and biggest kind of success stories are. And it's interesting, the ones who will tell you about deals and ones that'll tell you about internal projects they run. And it's the internal project people whose biggest failures and successes are internal to the company that tend to be more interesting than ones who talk about big sales opportunities they've had.
Right.
I think it's part of that mindset group of how you do things. The second thing we do is then I put them into a team interview where they literally just turn up and have a chat. And I am not on that meeting at all. And I let my team just have a chat with them, because as you said, Isabella, that personality, that's going to be the thing that really then comes out separate. And it's one thing to have it with me, but when you've got 7, 8, 9 other people on the call and you're having a discussion with them, you get to then get people who you trust very deeply giving you feedback on them as well. And then you can have follow-up interviews, you can do panel presentations and discovery sessions and things like that afterwards. But I think those two, the last 6 people we hired, pre their time when they actually went and did the demo scenario we then gave them for their third interview round, we already had a fairly good idea of this is the person who's going to, and they're going to be good. And we haven't quite been wrong yet on that. So I think that kind of feeling from not just myself, but then that kind of collective intelligence views from different groups, I think is really helpful to how people fit in and actually buy into that kind of, here's what we're doing as a team, here's how we're going, and we think somebody could come in, add to that and be a star.
It is great that you try to integrate so many perspectives to take a rational decision, if that makes sense. But this is the first time that I hear about it. So it's like an informal conversation with one of the people in your team, or
all of them, as many as you can turn up. Team harmony and balance is really important to us, because for many reasons, actually, because it's what I think breeds success more than anything else. Our retention rate has been very high over the years. Some of the people I'm working with now, actually, one of them was my boss when I started. So we've actually switched jobs over time. But yeah, we've been together a long time, and we stay together because the people make jobs more than anything else. Not the job's interesting and exciting, but when you can actually be part of that group, that's what's really key. But also, we try and find people who will be slightly different to the group as well, but fit within it. And that's why that team group meeting is so important, because I don't want 8 or 9 people who will agree with me on everything. I don't want 8 or 9 people. And the danger is, if I'm just judging by myself, it's very easy to pick people who fit with my beliefs exactly, but that'll never drive us forward. We won't innovate. So that's why getting a team perspective on people is going to be really helpful as well, as it allows you to see different sides of people. And first up meetings, people can be themselves, but they'll be the version of themselves that they think that they'll help them get a job, rather than in a team one where you've got lots of people with lots of different views. In fact, I'm still looking and trying to replace somebody who sadly left. We helped them move into the product, and then from product, somebody else came and poached them away, which was very, very upsetting. You spend a year helping them transition because that's their goal, and you help them, and then within 3 months of moving to a different team, they've left the company, and you're like, should have stayed with me. But he was. People were saying, "Oh, are you going to miss the fact that he's very combative with me on certain items?" And I sat there and go, "We really miss. I genuinely miss having that person in the team, because they had a completely different outlook to me, different perspective. But it helped us get better decisions. So therefore, that's something a team interview, I think, especially if I'm not on it, because they tend to be less political if I'm not there. They tend to be a lot open and more free on these things." Tends to bring out different points of view and perspectives, and that's really important when trying to look at the makeup of a team. They've got to be able to fit, and they've got to be able to offer something different, because otherwise we'll stagnate very quickly.
Yeah. Do you know what? You've really succinctly highlighted a lot of common themes from these conversations. And so I'd say the first one is, you talked about assigning value. So like, business acumen, customer centricity, competitiveness, being able to operate at C-level, openness, confidence. There's so many different components. And they're so, as you've kind of said, so soft skills based to a large extent, that inevitably through the interview process, a lot of gut feel and kind of intuition comes into play. And so gut feel, I think everyone recognizes that there's definitely a strong place for kind of gut feel and intuition. It's the product, humans are kind of experts in the sense that, sussing people out and that sort of thing. But there are also some dangers in terms of, you tend to have a bias towards people that think and act like you and that sort of thing. And so by bringing other people into the team and actively looking for that kind of diversity in terms of personality and approach, then you're naturally, you've got different people looking from a different perspective, and you can bring all that together and kind of test each other, if that makes sense, and kind of bounce off each other to then come to a good decision. So that's fantastic. So in terms of, going back to all of these different components that make up a great solution consultant, if you were to name one or two, which would they be? And then during the interview process, do you have these clearly kind of defined, like, do you go into the conversation and your team members go to the conversations with a clear idea in terms of what you're looking for to check them off? Or is it more intuitive?
There are clear things. I mean, being able to be comfortable when presenting and things like that, being able to be confident in a room and hold an opinion and have a differing opinion as well, and go, it's a really interesting point. However, maybe historically, I've thought of it like this. What about, and being able to be comfortable enough, particularly in interviews, to not just agree with what people are saying in the room and actually go, historically, what I found is like this. This was my experience of it. And I think when you can get people who are able to hold their own opinions and be comfortable holding their own opinions, I think that's a hugely important thing that we look for, rather than just agreeing to whatever we say in the room. And I know for a fact that one of the nice things about doing, again, the team interview is there are two people who will ask difficult questions continuously to get people's feedbacks and thoughts on that. I said one of them will do it because one of them I know does it just to test people, and the other one's just a bit like that. We all love them, but that's just who they kind of are. The other one though is actually the preparation they put in. And preparation is because I did say to somebody the other week, actually, to one of the one of the VPs, that the next account manager who turns around and says it's all on the demo, I'm going to slap, because the job's won or lost way before that. The demo is the least important part of everything. It should be the pulling together of things that all The main success of this job comes pre-discovery and then in discovery. That's it. That's where all of the hard work needs to go into. So people's ability to prepare for each stage of those interview processes is hugely important. We've seen somebody we hired really recently, their demo wasn't good. It wasn't good. They ended up presenting a bunch of PowerPoint slides. But the level of detail, I think they've misunderstood the scenario, to be perfectly honest. And the level of detail they went into showed how much research and work they put into that presentation. Same thing with the interview beforehand, is that he'd gone and Googled all of the people, LinkedIn, all of the people he's going to talk to, and actually asked them specific questions about their background and history. He came into the original interview having talked to me and came up with specific things he'd researched about Walter Sclure and Enablon and the company and all of that kind of stuff. And that mixed with the personality and the confidence and all of that lot, sat there and went, we can teach this guy how to present. That's not that hard, because he's got the confidence, he's got the ideas, he's got the domain knowledge, but he put the work in. And that ability to put the work in is something that sets people up. Without that, you can never be truly successful in this. And
there's an expression, casualness causes casualties, which I think there's definitely some truth there. And I think you're the first person that's actually talked about preparedness and preparation and so on. And I think you've definitely got something there. And I think, and it actually links to the question I was going to ask, is that so all of the research suggests, not with pre-sales, but with kind of knowledge worker positions, that conscientiousness, which is kind of like hard work, resilience, accountability, that sort of thing, is one of the strongest predictors of success in a position. And when we look at the interview, what tends to be the interview process for pre-sales, like you said, it's very heavy on communication, how you operate within a room, how you interact with people and that sort of thing. But it doesn't necessarily look at that kind of level of accountability and resilience, and when the going gets tough, how you react and that sort of thing. So it's almost, you can hire somebody who can have all the talent in the world, but it can fall apart if that kind of resilience and accountability isn't there. And in contrast, you can have somebody that's maybe doesn't have so much natural kind of ability in terms of performing in front of the audience and that sort of thing, but there's so much hard work and preparedness and so on in the background that it more than makes up for it, and people really pick up on that.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, let's say my top guy, I'd say he's working on a massive deal at the moment, but when he started, he had no background, no nothing. He had to work, but he got there because he worked incredibly hard all of the time. He made time for reading about domain, studying software, understanding. And he would go into meetings, and we were about 2 years ago, we started to look and go, look, you're doing really well on things that when you turn up and they go to plan, you're great. And then we then worked on the agility part, because when they wouldn't go right in a meeting and things came up out of nowhere, then it would fall apart. So we spent another year working on that. And I don't think he's ever truly forgiven me, because literally every 3 weeks for 6 months, he would turn up and have 15 minutes where I would play a random client from my past. Okay. None of them were nice people. And he would have 15 minutes to do discovery, find out what's going on, and potentially demo. And I would just be painstakingly difficult in different ways each time. And after he did all that, he just sat there and went, I've got no danger being in front of a client ever again, because geez, that's just he made different mistakes each time, and he failed in spectacular ways every time. But those are the kind of things that hard work stuff means that eventually you can teach the other stuff. It's harder to do it the other way around. Whereas compare that to this year, where because we've been short on people for 8 months while we've been trying to get these hires on board, I have picked up 1 or 2 opportunities. And it has always been said, it's me or we throw it away. But I warn you, I do not have time to prep anymore. I will literally just be turning up. And what's the saying? Being agile in a dynamic work environment, which I think is the politest way I can say of winging it we've actually got. And I'd say, be warned, this could fall apart because I will be relying on the fact that I'm very, very good. And 3 times this year, it's blown up on us because I turned around and went, I didn't tell you this could happen. Let's be perfectly upfront. But, that's the thing, is the team all are going past where I can be because there's only so much natural ability. I work very hard for it, but there's so much you can get away with by being talented without preparing, which is why I only pick up things that would be thrown away otherwise, just to help out.
Yeah, I get it. Are there any other, can you see any other blind spots in the hiring process? Do you think there are any abilities or skills or traits that tend to, the hiring process as it is doesn't pick up on that well?
The 2 that I struggle with at the moment is, the big one is interaction outside the team, because we co-own opportunities with account managers down the line.
Yeah.
But we have the same goal, but also we're going to fight about how we get there, because we've got standards, we've got best practices, we've got an approach of how we do it. Conflict resolution is probably the hardest thing to deal with, and it's to actually understand how diplomatic is someone going to be able to be. And it is a blind spot during the process that you don't know how they're going to be when you get 2 strong-willed people who have different views on how an account will go, and how can we get them to, I don't know how we test people's skill sets in those areas while also not making the interview process significantly longer, and it's already relatively long as it is. So I think that ability to be able to harmonize with external teams or outside of your own team, particularly with people you work with, I'm not quite sure how we go around that. Because what you don't want to be is, you can't be sales police, because that's not your job. But also at the same time, at the moment, that feels like my job. My job tends to be the sales police at the moment, where we turn around and go, guys, we seem to be a problem here. And they go, oh, well, this is what we're doing. So, okay, that's fine. Let's have a list. Why aren't you following best practice? Why are we ignoring process? And they go, oh, well, and you go, no, that's not, But they've got different and this is where I think also companies don't line up properly as well. And I haven't seen this done brilliantly anywhere before either. Is the fact that account manager told you need 5x pipe to go and do it, so go and generate pipe. And the reality is, we know, and I've got all of the statistics in the world to prove it, we need 2.1x, a certain type of pipe. That's it. And any more than that, and we're just filling it with stuff that we're not going to win. And that's problematic as well. So trying to get that conversation over one person who's driven by, you need 5x pipe, or else, the account, the sales leadership are going to have a go at you, compared to us on the other side going, here is our chances of converting this exact opportunity. Diametrically, we're not the same, because our biggest challenge is, we've got different challenges. Ours is the amount of research and work you need to do pre-demo means that everything is front loaded. And that's what we know wins. And that ability to then work with people and, as you say, have that emotional intelligence to be able to diplomatically sit there and go, guys, okay, we both disagree. How about we try this, this, and this instead? Or maybe we do this, rather than just, this is the process, I'm not changing from it. And, because the moment you start putting those walls up, you can lose opportunities very quickly, just because people don't want to work together. And you have to manage those relationships as well. And I'm still not sure how we kind of do that, because you want strong-willed people, because you can't have them roll over, but you also can't have it so they're picking fights every moment, because, if you're not fully aligned together, you're never going to win anyway. So And I don't know in the interviewing process how we can really look at that specific kind of challenge. Now, that might be more of a challenge based on the type of opportunities we have, the size, and maybe for kind of more point solutions, that's less of a problem because people are more, here's the value of the software I'm showing you, rather than trying to understand and fit into a strategic message pitch into both C-level, senior management, and, you know, kind of operators all within the one kind of discussion. I don't know. I think that might be more of an upper level issue than anything else.
So one of the sorry, Isabella, I'm hogging the time here. One of the so we built a pre-sales competency model with a company called Sova, and so there's 12 competencies, like, you know, customer centricity and so on. And one of them is having hard conversations, and the traits behind it is exactly a balance of being able to push back, being able to be firm, you know, having that kind of confidence to do that, but at the same time kind of doing it in a diplomatic way with emotional intelligence. And it's really hard to, in the interview process, you can talk a really good talk, you know, people can understand the best practices of how to work effectively with an account exec, but actually doing it is the hard bit. It's one of those things where, because emotions are involved and that sort of thing, and strong personalities and so on. And so yeah, it's interesting, and it's always been highlighted as one of the most important things to be effective within pre-sales.
Yeah, and I say outside of that, I think you can kind of get a sense over everything. I don't think there are other major blind spots, but I think it is that great unknown, because I've yet to work out or read about a good way of testing this in an interview process without going too far. And also, is it so much of an issue, or is it things that you can actually develop as skill sets with people during that process? Because it's also, you know, hiring people isn't the end of the journey, it's the start of their training, and obviously then coming up with a full-on training program of how to do that. And part of that is creating, it took me a year to get this done properly, but a career framework where you go from junior to consultant to senior to principal, because not everyone wants to manage people, and so therefore we needed an individual contributor pathway. And before that, everyone was just a consultant. So, you know, with varying pay levels, which made no real sense to anything because they didn't match. But then trying to actually put down, okay, this is what we'd expect people internally to be able to do, soft skills wise, tech, from the domain perspective. And I think that gave us about as much as you can do to try and sit there and go, as you move through these levels, we would expect you to be able to have the following skill sets, and then set training programs around where people are at, based on, not that you want these to be tick boxes. Actually, HR want them to be tick boxes. That's half of the problem with these. Here is what we'd expect if you want to become a senior consultant. We would expect you to be able to diplomatically resolve issues with accounts and work progressively with them. We don't see that at the moment. Let's work on that. Let's see if we can find you some training in this area to be able to do that. And I think those frameworks, coupled with things, also gives you an idea of where people sit originally, because you have a standard now of where you'd expect someone to come in as a junior, as a consultant, as a senior. And with that, you can kind of then start judging them against the standard to see if that's there. But that's relatively new and not been tested beyond much of what we've been doing this year, and with development programs for people, which have sadly only existed in the last 2 years properly, and this year actively against a measuring scale. So we're still trying to do an awful lot of work internally to push these things through. And hiring on that, I think having that scale of where you judge things and what's important can help stack people up against those and work out where their gaps and shortcomings are, and are they too much to overcome for the position they're applying for and trying to hire.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing so many insightful advices with us. I would have one last question. If you could go back and talk to yourself when you first started to hire, do you have any advice for you?
Build a framework early. Build a framework early and formalize some of the elements of it so you can actually score properly along the way. I think when I first hired people, now I've been hiring people for different roles for years now. So this is not kind of hiring people isn't new in that regard. I was always the one dragged into whenever account managers or inside sales were being interviewed to come and give my feedback on them. But I think a lot of it, when you're looking at actually hiring, and they're your decisions on the line, because in the end, you're going to be the one who in 6 months or a year turns around and either ticks a box or says you failed the company. I think a lot of it is just making sure you've got the framework around to actually be able to judge and score, but with also not being a slave to that thing. Because me historically would have been far too much on soft skills, empathy, actual gut feel on people than it would be on having some kind of formalized process and metrics along with it. And I think if you don't have that formalized process, that's problematic. And the other thing I've made sure we've done is anonymize CVs when they come to me for review. So I don't get to know anything really about them outside of their background and their personal bio. I think trying to take away any kind of potential for bias is important, which is helpful because the team is for a long time it was just a bunch of white guys, and I don't mean that and I don't care about that in that respect. And it's not about trying to find a balance based on, you don't want to sit there and go, I want to hit quotas of whatever. But what you do want is different points and different viewpoints and different thinking. And if you only getting collective intelligence is key. If I'm only hiring people because they look good on CVs because they've got the same CV as me, trying to take that bias out of it by not being able to see their name, locations, things like that until after you've done your first few reads and get to meet people and understand a bit more, I think helps promote a lot more of what you're looking for. So kind of, there's a load of advice I'd have given to my previous self.
That's amazing. So a framework early and balancing that with a bit of kind of agility, not agility, but within, like allowing some intuition to come into the process, but within the context of a framework, and anonymizing CVs. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for all the time today. It's been just super insightful to speak with you. You brought up lots of points that we haven't touched on before. So I think it's been really good in that respect. And you've clearly put a lot of thought into hiring and been very kind of open about, the journey of going through lots of different hires and learning as you go. So that's fantastic. Thanks so much for your time.
No worries. Look, guys, I say I'm always here to help. If you've got other questions, I say I love this industry. I absolutely adore it, and I like talking about it because I'm that kind of nerd, and that's, I'm all right with that. So, if you do ever have anything else, come back, and if either of you are at Demo Fest next week, I will see you there.
Amazing. Good stuff. Thank you.
No worries.
All right.